What is up, everybody? Welcome to another... God dang it, man. Come on. Come on. You knew the rules. You're not supposed to do this. Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources.
Just two cool dudes with on our MacBooks, drinking our $9 coffees.
Avocado toast on order for when the show's done. So we had some issues with our sound recording software, which meant that once again, Luis had to sign in. You're not doing a soundboard show. You know the rules. This was discussed.
I'm going to be perfectly respectful this entire.
Come on, man. This is not according to perfectly respectful.
I've altered the deal. Pray I don't alter it further.
Yeah, there we go. It's more accurate. All right. Well, welcome to the show. We've got, what is this, episode 490 lined up for you this week. And we're kind of back into the regular flow of things again after the set reviews and all that. War of the Spark's out, and it is time for us to give you our initial impressions. And boy, do we have a lot. And I can tell you that, just been on social media and on our various LR forums and such, man, people have strong opinions about War of the Spark. And we're going to go over those and then a bunch of impressions of the cards. And we're going to do 3 crack-a-packs minimum here as well to sort of dive in and get a feel for what we're thinking about the format. Before we do that, got to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. That's the place to go for all things magic related on the internet. Anything you need, you're going to find it at CFB. They've got single sealed product, anything, again, magic related, they'll have over there. And look, this is a place to go for War of the Spark. If you need to pick up a box so that you can draft with your friends or just, get the singles that you want for whatever decks you've been brewing or have, maybe your Commander deck or Canadian Highlander or some old school deck or whatever, channelfireball.com is the place to go to pick those up. And while you're there, of course, you can check out some of the awesome free content. This is really one of the coolest things going is that right on the front page, you can get, information similar to the information you get here on LR. This is, it helps you get better at the game. It helps you improve. And it's always more fun when you're improving and you can start seeing those improvements happen when you start winning more and more and more and start having a better understanding of what's going on. And some of the best players and content creators in the world over at CFB are there to guide you along your journey. Please do check them out, channelfireball.com. You can also support the show directly via the Patreon. That's patreon.com/limited resources. And you can go check that out. All the information's on Patreon. This is just a way to give back to the content creators that help maybe brighten your day a little bit. And if we're one of them, well, that's the place to go. Patreon.com/limited resources. Let's get into these crack-a-packs, Luis.
Let's do it.
Got a War of the Spark snack-a-pack right here. All right. So one thing we'll keep in mind here, of course, is that every pack is going to have a Planeswalker in it, which is something we've never seen before. First card out is Goblin Assailant. This is the 1 in a red 2/2. No. Makeshift Battalion, 2 and a white 3/2. Whenever it attacks and at least 2 other creatures are attacking, you get to put a counter on it.
Yeah, this card's it's passable. It's not something I want to first pick.
Yeah, I agree. Courage in Crisis, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Put a counter on target creature, then proliferate. So this reads put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature, and then you get to bump up anything else that's going on. The set is designed such that you just kind of do it to everything. Proliferate actually does add -1/-1 counters where applicable, but I don't think that's a thing in this set at all. Like, I think they just didn't even bother.
No, you're really just proliferating +1/+1 counters and loyalty counters on Planeswalkers.
Right.
But this card is a lot better than it looks. It's not a card I want to first pick. I'm not saying Slam, Crisis, and Courage, but it's a card that's pretty critical for the green, white, and green, blue proliferate decks, and you will be happy playing multiples. Sometimes this represents 3 or 4 counters.
By the way, let me make a quick note on the Sunset show. This is the card that Luis is going to get the name wrong on for the rest of the set.
Courage and Crisis.
There we go. Sorin's Thirst. Black for an instant. Yeah. It does 2 damage to creature and you gain 2 life.
I'm unimpressed with Sorin's Thirst.
What? Unimpressed? It's good.
It's
what you
fine.
need against the red-white deck or whatever.
Yeah, there's just not that many aggro decks, and the fact that it costs black means sometimes you just have it at the wrong time, and it ends up just being way too awkward.
Yeah, it's funny because normally we put a premium on these cheap removal spells, and this one's playable, but I agree with you. It's actually not that. It's not like a card that you need to go seek out early in the pack. Like I wouldn't consider picking it here thus far. I would consider picking the next card, which is La Rune Enforcer, white for a 1/2. You can pay 1 mana and tap it to tap target creature with converted mana cost 2 or greater. I mean, this is, I think, the best card so far, at least.
It's the best white common. Every color got a pretty noticeably pushed common. When La Rune Enforcer is whites. It just locks down anything except like a zombie army, and it ends up being exactly what you want in aggressive or controlling decks, so it's just a great card.
Yeah. I have heard rumblings, though, that white is the least powerful, least popular color thus far, so maybe that's a consideration. But for now, it's just the best card. Next is Defiant Strike, which is white. For an instant, target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and you draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine card, but it's not a card that you don't play it all that often unless you have synergies with it, which there are some, and you also just never take it early.
Yeah. Mana Geode, 3 mana artifact, taps for any color. When it ETBs, you scry 1. I have been experimenting and also seen the sort of multicolored green base deck with that can make not only different colors, but also just a lot of mana. Mana Geode, though, has not been the crux of that thus far.
It's one of the worst 5-color fixers, but it's still passable if you need it. Like,
yeah,
you can still definitely play this card if you don't end up picking up, Firemind's Essence, I guess is what it's called, the 4-mana artifact,
right? Yeah,
or any of the good green fixing,
right? Thunder Drake. This card's been pretty good. So 3 and a blue for 2/3 with flying, and whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Thunder Drake. One of the neat things that came up with this that I don't know, maybe it just wasn't super obvious to me at first, is you can play it and then play like a 1 or a 2 drop and it'll get the counter. That's the kind of thing that, boom, 3/4 flyer go is kind of a swing.
Yeah, I think that Thunder Drake it's a fine card. I like it a lot less than La Rune Enforcer, and it's expensive and it requires some work afterwards. So it's not a card you want tons of.
Yeah. And it is clunky, man, make no doubt. Okay, next is Charmed Stray, your friend Charmed Stray.
Yeah.
White for a 1/1 lifelinker. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control named Charmed Stray. So you end up running a few of these in your first draft at the Mythic Championship. And I was going to talk about it later, but since we opened in the pack, let's just hit it up now. You weren't the only one that tried it. I saw another player run a few of these in a similar build to yours with a few Grateful Apparitions and a Johnny's Pridemates and such. But the deck didn't seem good. Where are you at? Like, we knew we didn't like Charmed Stray, but it felt like the deck that you drafted was the right spot for it. Was it?
Yeah, so I had 2 Charmed Strays because I had 3 Johnny's Pridemates and 3 Grateful Apparitions. So it's the 2/2 that gains a +1/+1 counter whenever you gain life, and then the 1 on flying that proliferates on whenever it hits your opponent or one of their planeswalkers. So I just wanted creatures to enable both the Pridemates to get their first counter so I could proliferate, and also if you draw double Charm Stray and you have the Apparition, you can kind of go off a little bit from there. It ended up not working out great. I went 1/2 with the deck, and the biggest problem I had was that the removal in the set is so good that trying to put any of these combos together is really lacking when they go like, Jai is greeting your Pridemate. Like I had turn 1 Charm Stray, turn 2 Pridemate, right? Attack, put a +1/+1 counter. That's just a great draw. But my opponent just goes, Jai is greeting your Pridemate, and all of a sudden I'm left with a 1/1 lifelinker that just does not do enough. Or they Sorin's Thirst your, Grateful Apparition, and all of a sudden you just have these Charm Strays sitting there. So I'm pretty down on Charm Stray after trying that, even though that looked like the deck for it.
Okay. So maybe there just isn't a deck for it? Is that?
Yeah, I just don't think that it's a card that really fits in this format. There are some formats where it could fit, but this is not one of them.
Okay. Next is Vraska's Finisher, 2 and a black for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature, planeswalker, an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. We like this card, quite a bit in the set review. Gave it a C+, I think, and it has been what I thought it would be. it lives up to its name. It finishes off planeswalkers really well. It lets you leverage small evasive creatures really nicely. The Sky Theater Strix or whatever, which often can attack and hit a planeswalker, but can't often actually kill a planeswalker. Vraska's Finisher does a good job. Also, this is kind of the, like the red alert card. Like your opponent makes an attack that just looks silly or doesn't make any sense. If they're playing black, you should always run it through your head and say, what if they have Vraska's Finisher? What do my blocks look like there? Is this a classic situation is like you have a 5/5 and they have a 1/1 and they're like, attack you. Right. And it's like really tempting to be like, well, there's no combat tricks. Like they need 2 combat tricks just to kill, I'm going to block. Like I'll take the free card or whatever. They made a mistake or they're willing to spend too much to get rid of this card or whatever. Even though you were at 19 and you could go down to 18, no problem. And then they go, cool, Vraska's Finisher. And they effectively traded off their 1/1 for your 5/5.
So the difference though is that while that's entirely true. And like when I played against Paulo Vitor Domidarosa in the Pro Tour, actually, I had Vraska's Finisher. What's that?
Mm-hmm. Never heard of him, but.
Oh, yeah. I had Vraska's Finisher, and like he didn't block my 2/2 with his 1/3, because he knows what's up, and that's even not that suspicious of an attack. Mm-hmm. But imagine the same situation. You've got a 5/5, they have a 1/1, and you've got a Planeswalker. Mm-hmm. And they attack your Planeswalker with the 1/1. Now, there's no way to play around Vraska's Finisher, right?
Yes, that's right.
Either you block and they finish off 5/5, or the Planeswalker takes 1 and the Finisher kills it. So that makes this quite a bit better than previous iterations of this card.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, and it is a very common scenario to have the Planeswalker and a creature out. So keep it in mind, right? I mean, I think that the number one goal here is that, look, this is a good card, right? And it has a meaningful effect on the game. That's fine. It's going to do what it's going to do, but you should be making decisions with that in mind, not getting blindsided by this. And I know it's only week 1 of the format, but come on, you're an LR listener. Have some, hold yourself to a standard here.
I like Finisher quite a bit. I found it's really easy to get value off of it.
Yeah, so right now the cards that stand out are Sorin's Thirst, Law-Rune Enforcer, and Vraska's Finisher.
Yeah, Law-Rune Enforcer is miles better than those other 2.
Yeah, it is, but do you really want to take it? Maybe.
Yeah, I'm happy starting there.
All right, here's the uncommons. D-Spark. This is black-white for an instant target. Exile target permanent with converted mana cost 4 or greater.
This card's just fine.
Yeah.
It can handle some nice big things, and that's good, but like often, like the problem is when it misses, it's pretty bad to have your removal spell not be able to kill the thing you want to kill. And when there's planeswalkers involved, imagine they have a planeswalker in like a Narset or something, and you really want to kill their blocker, but their blocker is also cheap. Then all of a sudden you have a removal spell that does not help remove their blocker and kill their planeswalker.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big cost.
Yeah, and also, even though D-Spark does hit many of the planeswalkers that you actually care about, both at uncommon and above rarities, we talked about this on the set review, that the transactional cost of they play a planeswalker, get some value, and then you use the card to destroy it. Now, that isn't great for you. Not that you may not have a choice, right? And having a D-Spark in your hand, you'll be happy you do at that point. But again, leveraging your creatures, try to kill the planeswalkers might be a better way to go overall.
Yeah, I like this less than Law-Rune Enforcer. It's probably
also gold, right?
Well, yes, because it's gold. Also, because I think Law-Rune Enforcer is just better. I think it's the second best card here, though.
Okay. Next is, hey, it's your buddy, Grateful Apparition. 1 and a white for a 1/1 flyer. Whenever it hits a player, Planeswalker proliferate.
I think this card's really good. I would take it over Enforcer, just because when this snowballs, it just gets out of control. Imagine turn 2 you play this, turn 3 you play Teo's Light Shield, put a +1 counter on this, hit, and then proliferate. You just have a 3/3 flyer and play on turn 3.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And you can just imagine a lot of situations like if you have Pledge of Unity, the green-white instant that gives a +1 counter to all your creatures, all of a sudden you're just proliferating onto all your creatures. It just fits what green-white wants to do so much. It is more of a green-white card, though, so it's not, I mean, you'll play it in blue-white or red-white or whatever, but it's way more of a green-white card than anything else. It is nice in black-white with the amass tokens, same with blue-white.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Next uncommon is Jaya, Venerated Fire Mage. This is 4 and a red for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. -2, she does 2 damage to any target. And then if another red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, deals that much damage +1 to that permanent or player instead. I've been really impressed by Jaya, actually.
Jaya is great. I mean, we mentioned this in the set review, but like unlike a lot of cards that are templated kind of like this, she makes your creatures deal more damage. Like she acts as +1/+0 to all your red creatures, +1 damage on all your other red effects. That's a pretty big deal. And just being able to cast 2 shocks is pretty good too.
Yeah, the shocks are actually very powerful, especially when you look at so many of the smaller, like we call them utility creatures, right? The ones that aren't necessarily built to just attack and block, but that have a big effect on the game. Like, for example, out of this pack, Law, Rune, Enforcer, and Grateful Apparition, right? You know, Vraska's Finisher dies to it. Like, if you play this and kill one of their things, I had a situation in a draft I did already where I played Jaya, killed a card that I was like quite happy to use Jaya's ability on. And then my opponent, who was playing, I think, Black-White, which is a good, you know, like she's going to have a lot of targets in that. They drew their card and they're just like paused for a while and then just passed the turn back. And I just left Jaya on 3 loyalties sort of indefinitely because they just didn't want to throw their next card into it, you know? And I'm like, hey, this is great. Like, my opponent's not playing spells. And if they do, I get to just snap it off with Jaya. The deck I happen to have wasn't really taking advantage of her static ability, but still, 2 shocks is actually quite good against a wide range of these decks. You know, cards like Evolution Sage, you know, what's it called? The blue one. That the stupid thing, what is it called? The proliferate one.
Yeah.
Anyway, flux channeler.
Flux channeler, yeah.
Yeah, like these type of cards are sitting around having a major impact on the game, and Jaya just picks them off. So yeah, I would take Jaya here over the Grateful Apparition myself.
Yeah, I would as well.
Okay, we've got our rare here, and it is sweet. I actually have a section later to talk about this, so we can just talk about it now.
This is Bolas' Citadel.
Yes, it is. It's sick read, dude. Yes, we got Bolas' Citadel, 3 black for a legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You can play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than paying its mana cost. And then it has tap, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. So we talked about it on the show. And look, this is a hard card to evaluate at face value, right? But you talked me into it being quite strong. And I'm like, okay, I can see that. Like, and also, you know, was it you? Somebody compared it to Future Sight, you know, an old card.
Yeah, it wasn't me, but I remember someone told that to you and you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm coming around. So now I was like really excited to get a chance to try the card out, right? Because at first I was confused and then I was like, I'm in. Well, I drafted it. I actually splashed it in a blue-green deck. I'm not kidding. Like triple black splashed it. But I had good fixing in one of those globes or whatever. And so I was like, I'm going to make this work. And I did. And the card is awesome. Like, it is super stupid. I casted it at 18 life one game and at 20 life another game. And I was at like 4 after I just went and just like cast everything I could off the stupid thing. And it was sweet. And then a couple of turns later, I just attacked with everything and then finished them off by activating Bolas' Citadel. And it was fantastic. So I think I'm in love, Luis.
Oh, well, the card is really powerful. Think about it as a 6-drop that says if you're at like 13 or more life, you know, you win the game. It's not quite that simple, but that's kind of similar to what you're doing. And yeah, that is a really powerful effect. I have already lost to this card in one of the few drafts I've done online.
Yeah. So the question I have, though, is because I had fun, right? And it was really powerful. But also, I did draw this card when I was at 6 life, and it did not much.
It is close to a blank then.
Right. So the question is, like, we have some powerful options here. We have Grateful Apparition, Jaya Venerated Fire Mage, Bolas' Citadel. So let's fast forward and let's say that you're at another Mythic Championship or a Grand Prix or something, like a serious environment here. Are you taking it? Like,
yeah. Oh, I'm slamming Citadel here.
Okay, sweet. Because that was my inclination as well after having played with it. But I want to keep myself in check and not just go like, this is so powerful and so sweet, but then just recognize also that, like, boy, if you're getting beaten down, it is terrible. You know, like it's really not what you want to have in your hand, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just such a high payoff. And given this format, there's a lot of decks that cannot punish you. Like, the reason I lost to Citadel was I was playing a black-green deck splashing blue and white with a lot of powerful cards, but I didn't have much in the way of pressure, and my opponent just played turn 6 Citadel twice and just overran me so fast.
Oh, and it's incredible. The turns that you have when you go off with it are just absurd. You can also use things to manipulate the top of your library, like card draw or mill, to help get you to other stuff. It's just, it was really fun, actually, to sort of piece together the turn. I don't think my opponent would agree, but
yeah. So I think I would take Citadel over all but the best uncommons, I think.
Okay, I'm slamming Citadel here as well. One question I had on it. Is it worth it to try to prioritize some type of life gain to make it better?
It is.
Okay. Because I didn't have any, but I was like,
Well, think about it this way. Do you remember Lich's Mastery in Dominaria?
Yeah.
These are very similar cards, but Lich's Mastery rewarded you for having life gain because then you started to draw a bunch of cards, and it also protected you when you by letting you trade resources for cards. This is kind of the opposite
for life,
where it lets you leverage life gain into more cards too. But this finds the cards and does it. Basically, this pays you in advance.
Right, it gives you up front, and then you win by the time you need to pay it back anyway.
Yeah, and that's a huge difference. So I actually liked Lich's Master. I thought it worked. I played it at the Pro Tour and Pro Tour Dominaria. I had Lich's Master in one of my decks. But
I remember. But
when it comes to Bolus of Citadel, I think the card's better, and the format lends itself to it very nicely. I think Citadel is just a very good card.
Okay, cool. Let's do another Crack-a-Pack.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we already got the best card, so there's really nowhere to go from here. But we'll see. Maybe something. All right, first card is Luis. It's our preview card, and I think it sucks. It's Crush Descent.
Yep.
3 and a blue instant. Whatever, they have to pay 2 extra or the spell gets countered and you get to amass 2.
Yeah, my opinion on this card hasn't changed. I think it's quite bad. I watched someone lose a game next to me in the Pro Tour because they had this card in their hand and they just kept leaving it up and their opponent just played around it and it was just horrible for them.
Yeah. Why is this our preview card? Come on. Invading Manticore is next. It's 5 and a red for a 4/5 zombie Manticore. And when it enters the battlefield, you amass 2. So you get a 4/5 and at least a 2/2. These 6s are good. We haven't got a Tidebearer Giant yet, but I've actually got some words about that one. I really like it. Invading Manticore also seems fine. With the problem that we had in the set review, and I think still exists, is just like, do you need a 6-drop? And is this going to be the one that you want? This is a totally serviceable card.
Yeah, they're just so replaceable between Tidebearer Giant and Kyora's Dambreaker. And other invading Manticores. It's just easy to find 6-drops to play in your decks. And this is a fine one, but I would never take it early.
I'm kind of offended that you said Tidebearer Giant is
it's on par. It's on par with the rest of those cards.
Come on, man. Have you read it? It draws you a card.
Yeah, so Kyora's Dambreaker gives you a bunch of counters. I mean,
yeah. And has more power and toughness. Next is Gideon's Sacrifice. This is the white instant. Choose a creature. Planeswalker you control, all damage dealt. Would be dealt this turn to you, and permanents you control is dealt to that thing instead. We didn't like it, and I haven't seen it do anything yet in the format. So I think it's still just bad. Naga Eternal, 2 and a blue, 3/2. You still not going to put this in your deck anymore?
Yeah, I'm still Naga looking to play this.
Crunch Wrangler. Man. Yeah. It was brutal. I had to say, Raging Crunch and Crunch Wrangler at the Mythic Championship commentary booth, and it just sounded weird. But yeah, this guy's pretty decent. It's 1 and a green for a 2/1 Trampler, and whenever a creature with power 4 or greater ETBs on your side, you get to put a counter on it.
Yeah, I think Crunch Wrangler is actually pretty good. There's just not that many 2-drops, and this one frequently just gains 1 or 2 counters, and with Proliferate in the set, that actually is worth a lot more than you might think initially.
Yeah, I got ran over by this online. Person had 4 or 5 of them or something. Kaya's Ghost Form. I see people keep playing this, but I'm still not really impressed by it. It's the black enchantment. It's an aura. It enchants a creature or planeswalker you control, and when it dies, it comes back to the battlefield.
Yeah, this needs just very specific things to happen for this to work out.
Right. Yeah, the planeswalker side is interesting.
That's
right?
the more powerful one for sure.
Right, because when a creature comes back, it's just the creature again. But when a planeswalker comes back, especially when they only have minus abilities, it's refreshed with new loyalty, and you can start doing it again. So that part I get. That's cute. The downside is that a lot of these planeswalkers are designed so that you can't choose to bring them off the battlefield. It's 5 loyalty, -2, and then they just sit there. And it can be difficult for you to actually get it dead. And of course, if you put Kaya's Ghost Form on it, people aren't going to attack it unless they absolutely have to. So I'm not a big fan. Herald of the Dread Horde, 3 and a black, 3/2. When it dies, you amass 2. This card looked actually pretty good on camera at the Mythic Championship, though I haven't actually played with it myself yet.
It's a fine card. It's pretty resilient, so it's a good way to protect your planeswalkers. Maybe put a little pressure on your opponent. Go to sacrifice cards. Again, nothing special, but at least I like the Herald. I would tend to play it.
Yeah, same. Prismite, 2 mana, 2/1. You can pay 2 mana to add 1 mana of any color. That card has not been good. Giant Growth. This is still very powerful, it turns out. Green mana instant turret creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. It is interesting. I mean, you get yourself into combat situations, and I don't know about you, but the shorthand I use in my head is, well, what if they have a Giant Growth? In this case, it's like, well, what if they actually have Giant Growth? Because they could.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's very good. I just think that this format does not lend itself to Giant Growth effects, including Giant Growth being good. And those slots are often taken up by +1/+1 counter granting cards because those work with the themes of the set. So I think that you would much rather have Crisis and Courage than Giant Growth in most of your green decks.
Right, and that's really interesting because in a normal set that wouldn't be the case at all. Right, a Giant
Growth's a powerful card. One mana for +3/+3 is just a good deal. But it just happens that this set does not have a lot of decks that really want pump spells. So this is at its best in like red green, but it's just not a card you play all that often.
No, yeah, and if you're wrangling crunches, Giant Growth will go fine. Spark Harvest, this card's good. This is black for sorcery. Destroy target creature or planeswalker, but as an additional cost to cast it, you either have to sack a creature or pay 3 and a black. I'm in for that. This card has been really
not
good.
The best black common, surprisingly, but certainly the second best, and it is quite good.
Yeah, it's the best card out of the pack so far. Just really good removal spell. Kills the 2 things that you need to kill the most in this set.
And does so for either 1 mana or 5 mana, depending on the game situation, which is pretty valuable also.
Yeah, it really is. Because you can use that 1 mana version as real kind of tempo play, where you play something else in a turn and Spark Harvest away their most important thing and then slam, or if it's late in the game, you don't need to. So that would be my pick out of the commons, but we're in the uncommons now, and typically these tend to usurp the commons, and this one does already. Paradise Druid, 1 and a green, 2/1. It has hexproof as long as it's untapped, and it taps to add a mana of any color. Been loving this one, bud. This one has been really nice for me. Again, a combination of these green ramp creatures or spells that fix and add mana really do offer a lot of flexibility, and Paradise Druid is a premium one for sure.
Yeah, I think Paradise Druid is great. 5-color green is also a pretty nicely supported archetype. The question is, do you want Paradise Druid over just Soul Harvest or Spark Harvest?
Yeah, and I think I do.
Yeah, I would also take that.
Yeah. So far, I've been really impressed by that green deck. Rescuer Sphinx. This is the 2 blue, 3/2 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you can return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If you do, the Sphinx gets a +1/+1 counter.
I like Rescuer Sphinx quite a bit. It's a 4 mana 4/3 flyer with generally upside because there's a lot of things that you can bounce, like a planeswalker on low loyalty. You can bounce a creature with enter the battlefield. You can even bounce the stupid guild orb to draw a card again.
Yep.
And I like this more than Paradise Druid. I would start with just the Rescuer Sphinx.
Okay, I would still take Paradise Druid based on my experience so far, but they're close.
Yeah, they're both quite good.
Another one good, Davriel Rogue Shadow Mage, 2 and a black for a 3 loyalty planeswalker, -1, target player discards a card. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 1 or fewer cards in hand, Davriel deals 2 damage to them.
This is a card I lose to all the time. My opponent just plays Davriel and makes me discard 3 cards, and it just feels so bad.
Yeah, it does.
I think it's worse than the other 2 uncommons we talked about, but Davriel is very good. I would take Spark Harvest over Davriel as well.
I would too.
I like Davriel. Yeah.
You go ahead.
I was going to say I like Davriel, but it's just not a super high priority card.
I agree. And also Davriel fluctuates a lot based on the matchup. If your opponent is playing red, green, or green, white, or any type of really assertive deck or any type of deck with evasion, Davriel is actually quite fragile. You'll play Davriel -, and then Davriel's at 2.
Yeah.
Like that is not that much loyalty to try to take off, in which case you've traded 1 for 1 and it was their choice, not a card you'd like. On the other hand, if your opponent is playing, Guild Globes and, planes, they're like Dovin Go or whatever, right? You play Davriel and they are really sad because you're going to get all 3 cards out of it. So, this is to me a main deckable card for sure. Like I would start Davriel in the main, but I would not hesitate to take Davriel out. Like this is a card that I could definitely, see replacing with some just like replacement level creature that can block in the right matchup. And that's also why I like Spark Harvest over Davriel. But I would take Paradise Druid over all of these.
Yeah, it's reasonable.
Our rare's nice. We like this one too. Widespread Brutalite. 1 black, red for a sorcery, amass 2. Then the army you amassed deals damage equal to its power to each non-army creature.
Yeah, I think that Widespread Brutality, it's just such a powerful card. It's easy to splash in, blue-red as well, or even black-blue, depending. So I think that it ends up being a card that you want quite a bit.
Indeed. So I would take it. One more crack a pack here, and then we'll start jibber-jabbering about everything else. Let's see here. First card is Gideon Sacrifice. We still don't like it. All right, so here's one that I've seen other people play a lot. I haven't myself. It's Teferi's Time Twist. It's 1 and a blue instant, exile target, permanent you control. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. If it enters the battlefield as a creature, it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So the main use I've seen for this is to reset planeswalkers. They've done it in 2 ways. One of them is just to simply play one of the 5 loyalty -2 planeswalkers and go -2/-2, and then at some point play Teferi's Time Twist. The other way I've seen is to play a planeswalker, get some value out of it, and then when the planeswalker is going to get attacked to die, then you Teferi's Time Twist, and that effectively gains you, that life that the player would have thrown at you instead.
Yeah,
I don't know if any of this is actually worth it.
So the most common time to play this is when you have a bunch of ETB effects and you have a Spells Matter deck, and you just want another tricky spell to play. But you're totally fine, including this if you need 1 extra card. It's a card that gets cut more often than not, that's for sure.
Yeah, and this class has that classic hallmark of card that looks interesting and you might want to do something with, but just doesn't replace like a good creature or a removal spell.
Yeah, exactly. It's the filler slot, which you don't get too many of.
Right, but this card has been fine-ish. Yeah, I don't know if it's quite worth a card.
It's also a really good sideboard card against removal, especially people who have like expensive removal. Because it does end up countering it for an advantage.
Mm-hmm. And Spark Harvest. I mean, geez, it's really good against Spark Harvest, especially if they sack the creature. Primordial Worm 4GG 7/6. No.
Playable, but nothing exciting.
Right. Kaya's Ghost Form. No, we talked about that one. Sarkhan's Catharsis, 4 and a red for an instant. It does 5 damage to target player or planeswalker. I do not like this.
No, I have not had opportunity to play this card. I just always cut it.
Yeah, same. Vraska's Finisher. We like that one. That would be my pick so far, I think. Yeah, that would be. Next is Sahili's Silverwing. This one just has the funniest little trinket text. It's 4 mana, 2/3 with fine. And when it enters the battlefield, it'll go to the top card of an opponent's library. It's just like, what?
I mean, this card is pretty mediocre, but you can play it to attack planeswalkers or to defend yours against flyers. It has some uses, but it's mostly a sideboard card.
Yeah. Ooh, Bloom, baby. Bloom Hulk, 3 and a green for a 4/4 when it ETBs you proliferate. Well, I would take that.
That's the pick right now. Yeah. This is green's best common. It's a 4 mana 4/4 already good, and then often gives you some other value coming in as well.
Yeah. Is this the pushed common?
Yeah, it is. 4 mana 4/4 with a good summon.
Yeah. It's your favorite card.
Charm Stray.
Yep. Yeah, take it. Poor Louise. Even Eternal. Get out of here, Bloom Hulk. I like Even Eternal better. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flying that amasses 1 when it enters the battlefield.
Oh, yeah, this card is really nice. It's the best blue common. 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer plus a 1/1's already good. You can also just stack onto other amasses if you need to. It just does everything. It's good defensively, pretty good offensively, so it's just a great card.
Yeah. Yeah, you basically play as many as you can get as well. I had an opponent play 3 of them in one game, and I'm just like, that's just great. Like, it's just getting better the more they play. All right, that brings us to the uncommons. Let's see if we can knock Aven Eternal off of its perch here. This is Leyline Prowler. Yep, get out of here, Aven Eternal. 1 black-green for a 2/3 Death Touch lifelinker that taps to add mana of any color.
Yeah, this card is great.
I love the Prowler.
It's great at blocking. It could be good at attacking if you need it to, and it fixes 5 colors for the black-green deck, which is what the black-green deck wants to do a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, it is gold. So, Aven Eternal, very solid card in blue, Bloomhulk just in green. I'm willing to take the Leyline Prowler here and kind of go out on a limb because I've liked this archetype so far. But am I?
No, I think that's perfectly reasonable. Like, it's just a more
Okay.
powerful card to start with, even if it's a little riskier.
Yeah.
But we'll get to power level versus risk. It's one of the first things I want to talk about once we're done with our crack packs.
Oh yeah. Next is 10th District Legionnaire. This is red white for a 2/2 with haste, and whenever you cast a spell that targets it, you get a counter on it and you scry 1. It's kind of the linchpin for this archetype.
Yeah, it is totally fine. It's not a card I want to start with quite as much as the Leyline Prowler because I think it's a little worse, and I think red white's a little worse. But getting a mid pack 10th District Legionnaire is definitely a good signal that red white is open, and it's really powerful in red white.
Yeah, you just need to support it. Our Planeswalker is the Wanderer. 3 and a white for a 5 loyalty. Planeswalker, prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to you and other permanents you control, and you can -2 to exile target creature with power 4 or greater. Card's been good. It's actually a pretty good card.
Yeah, Wanderer's good. It's not a sideboard card exactly because you can just certainly main deck it, but it is much more effective post board than it is in the main deck. Because sometimes you'll play against like a blue deck that just doesn't have good targets, for example.
Do you think we need to come up with what's a good term we can use for card that we tend to main deck, but with an eye to sideboarding out when it's bad, versus a card that like a sideboard card where we keep it in the board and bring it in when it's great? We should think about that, or maybe throw it to our listeners. I think I still just like Leyline Prowler out of the pack going to our
I would just take Leyline Prowler so far.
Dreadhorde Butcher, black red for a 1/1 haster, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target.
Yeah. I mean, this card's fine if you're black-red, but it's not a card I want to first pick because when you don't have this in your opening hand, it gets so much worse. It just becomes a goblin arsonist.
Yeah, or a Footlight Fiend or whatever.
Yeah, and that's just not very exciting. So I would rather just slam the Leyline Prowler here.
Yeah, same. That's what I would take too. Okay, so let's get into the big picture stuff here. We're going to talk some cards. I'm going to throw a bunch of cards at you in a little bit, and we'll kind of give our takes on them that stood out to me as either being different from the set review or just noteworthy. But the headliner here, and the thing that everybody has been sending us on social media and everybody's been talking about, is how princely this format feels, right? This format feels like maybe the most Prince format we've had in since you first came on the show at Fate Reforged. It feels super bomby.
Yeah.
Is that it? That's all you have to say about it?
I think that people are overreacting a little because they haven't played with something like Fate Reforged for a long time, or a lot of people who haven't played it at all. But it is also not overstating it to say that the rares are just ridiculous in this format.
I mean, they are so ridiculous. And we knew that when we did the rare review. We were handing out A's
we were there.
candy on Halloween. Yeah, but it has played out that way as well, right? Because we have had some sets that looked quite bomby, but it turns out that the common removal lined up well with it. So you didn't really feel like you were actually losing to the bombs all the time, or they were relatively kept in check. This one, though, it kind of feels like we are actually losing to them, and it's one of those sets that might end up being really dictated by the high power rares rather than the commons and uncommons, or the synergies between the colors. Yeah,
I think that you're going to end up in a spot where it impacts the gameplay because it means that cards that can deal with rares are more valuable. Like Toll the Invasion is something that's gone up for me in as I've drafted more. This is the 2 and a black.
Which one is that?
2 and a black, look at their hand, take a card out of it.
Oh, yeah.
It also impacts how you draft. That's one of the first things I want to talk about was, in most draft formats, the goal that we tell listeners, the goal that we try to lead them to and teach about is try to identify the open colors and draft those colors. And that's what you're trying to do. And you're trying to, abandon your first couple picks. If you start out blue, black, and then you get a bunch of red and white cards in the middle of the pack, and you're like, okay, red, white is open. Time to abandon that, move into a new color pair, and have the best deck because you have multiple packs of these colors being open. I do not believe that is the best strategy in War of the Spark. In War of the Spark, there's two things going on. One, which we already just talked about, is the rares are absurd. Like, there's a lot of them, and the power level of the top rares are so much better than the non-rares. Like, you just can't compare Ugins and Lilianas and, God Eternals to any of the common uncommon cards. So that, combined with the fact that this is a really deep set for playables, there's tons of playables. Each color, like the 7th best common in each color, tends to be pretty good. You end up in a spot where you are not punished by drafting a color that's cut off nearly the same way. So imagine this. You open the Liliana, right? And it doesn't matter what your second color is. Let's say you're in a black, you're starting to go black-white, and it just becomes abundantly clear that red and green are open in the middle of the pack and black is not. You should still probably end up drafting black. Like, you should still, like, I would first pick Liliana and draft black if I got to see face up my opponent to my right first picking Liliana.
Okay, yeah, that's insane.
Right? And that's not...
I mean, that's so crazy.
And that's not generally what draft strategy is like, right? Like, most of the time, we would say, hey, if you see that your opponent's face up picking black cards, if you get that read, if you get the signal, you should try to figure out what they're not in so you can get all the right picks.
Jump ship.
But that's just not how it works. And I think that you're going to end up in a spot where you're better off not abandoning your rares and just kind of tunnel visioning on your rares. And
you're saying this very as a matter of factly. Doesn't this kind of suck?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, it takes away some of the nuance, right? That rewards people that, put in the work and kind of understand what's going on. If it's just like, take whatever bomb rare you open and hang on for dear life.
Yeah. And it also means it means that you're going to, not only are you yourself going to be tested less in terms of draft skill, it means your opponents are going to be too. So it's going to be more correct to do what all the people who don't really know how to draft quite as well do anyway, which is open Liliana and never get off black.
Right, for sure. So, I mean, look, to me, the way I approach these things is, look, these are all just a puzzle, a challenge that I need to figure out how to maneuver through. So if I know that in this particular set, I'm more incentivized to stick on that first pick if it is so much better than the other cards, then that's fine. I'll do it. Right. But I won't lie. I do enjoy the nuance of kind of understanding when and when not to do that. If it's almost never correct to leave your first pick bomb, that's like kind of less interesting overall, I guess.
Yeah, and it also means you're going to play against more bombs because in a normal draft format, let's say you go back, like one set, right, and or two sets, I guess, to like, let's say Guilds of Ravnica, and I first picked Thief of Sanity. Well, if it turned out Boros was open, I might just draft Boros and Thief would be in my sideboard, and there would be one fewer bomb rare getting played. In this format, those cards will just always get played. Mm-hmm. So you play against more rares this way too, and it's correct for people to play those rares.
Because they've just been incentivized to do so. Do you think that this is going to go down as one of the most print sets we've had in the, kind of the modern era?
I think that this is not a print set.
You don't think it's a print set?
No.
What?
I think this is a king set. I think this is not. I would not use the same term. They set a
new bar?
Yes, I would not use the same terminology to describe this because when we talk about print sets, we talk about sets where the rares, are important and there's a lot of them. But this is just like a level above how I would interpret that. So I think in general, I think you're going to end up in a spot where you will see this set as being miles above what you normally would expect out of a limited set. And Fate Reforged was the same way. That's the last set that I've felt the same way about this.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. I think that we talked about it in the rares review, but I mean, when they spotted us 2 cycles of mythic rares that had, maybe 8 out of 10 of them got an A, maybe it was 9 out of 10. I can't remember. I think maybe only like the green finale or something didn't quite get it. Then, yeah. I mean, what else, then any other cards are just great. The fact that there's planeswalkers so prevalent in this set meant that any of the rare and mythic rare planeswalkers kind of had to be really great too. And they are, the spots where I look that are really pushing this as far as volume are those mythic rare slots that I just mentioned, the finales and the God Eternals, and then the rare, specifically the rare planeswalkers, because the mythic rare planeswalkers you can kind of pencil in as being great, but every set has some number of those these days. But the rare planes, like Jace, is just a regular rare that you're going to see sometimes, and these cards ended up being really powerful too.
Yeah,
so that's just meant for a ton. Yeah. Okay.
And so that does mean that, you should approach draft a little differently than you would normally. And yeah, I don't love that. I think that's one of the parts about the format that makes it less replayable to me, because one of the issues is if you have a normal game of limited, but then your opponent plays no Ketra, it kind of doesn't matter what the decisions you made in the first 5 or 6 turns of the game were.
Right.
You can strong. You can do everything you can, and then your opponent plays Ugin or Liliana, and maybe you made some good maneuvers earlier. Maybe you ended up in a spot where, you made some good decisions and you got some value, but it just kind of doesn't matter when your opponent is just slamming, these powerful cards. And that kind of makes it so a lot of the cards in the format don't matter. So I do really like that the commons are pushed, and I think that does matter too. But you just have to keep an eye on what really drives the format. And in this case, it's the rares, to the extent that I think that you're less supposed to identify what colors are open and more stick to the colors of your best cards. Now, that isn't to say you should ignore it. Mm-hmm. If you don't start with one of these broken cards, yes, it's very important to figure out what colors are open, because you also might get past one of those busted cards, right?
Right.
Like, imagine you notice that blue and green are open. It might be that you end up getting past, a Royalesque or whatever, the high Apex hybrid at some point, if your opponent doesn't end up going into blue-green.
Yeah,
so
that's for sure.
It's still important, but yeah, the headliners of the set really do headline the set.
Indeed. Yeah. So that's something that we'll keep an eye on. One thing I'm curious about is how it affects the longevity of the set, meaning, when I get to draft number 40 or whatever, am I going to be like, okay, I just can't do this anymore? Like, my opponent played a stupid Kefnet and I'm just like, I can't beat it, and I'm off it,
Yeah.
Or is it going to be like, no, we figured it out, like, or everybody has bombs and you need to just sort of manage it. I think that there's a lot of ways that this could branch off, and I'm curious to see where that goes. Another big kind of prevailing wisdom that people have been talking about is how complicated the format is.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Like, this might be, one of the most complicated formats we've had in recent years, right? I know that going way back in time, there was a lot of like static abilities on cards and things could get kind of out of hand with the onboard stuff, but we haven't had that in a while with the advent of they call it the New World Order or whatever, right? Where things got kind of simplified down a little bit to kind of their core, like what was important about the card, rather than just throwing random trinket text and stuff on that just sort of serve to complicate things. But this set, given that the planeswalkers have these static abilities and that there's so many planeswalkers and they're quite good, so we actually play them, it can actually make it pretty hard to track everything that's going on board. And then there's some random curveballs and stuff too, like Turret Ogre, has reach, and like BDM's been giving me his running update of number of cards Turret Ogre has sniped because their opponent just didn't know, that kind of thing. And I've also just been looking up cards on Scryfall on the notes section there and going, oh, okay, this is how this works. Like, there was a big moment that we had at the Mythic Championship about Sarkhan, and how Sarkhan affected how damage is dealt to him and stuff like that. And this is a situation that I bumped into actually in my first draft of the format. I was playing against Maria Bartholdi from Good Luck High Five, and she had Sarkhan out and then also had Chandra out. And I was like, well, if I burn spell this, if I block, like what happens to the loyalty versus the creature? What happens to the other ones? And so I looked it up and we sorted it out. And then it just happened to come up on air at the Mythic Championship as well. And in this case, the player was told the wrong ruling, like by the judge, because it was like, wait, and then they had to rewind and fix it a turn and a half later or whatever. But there's a lot going on with these cards. And I think the toughest part is the static abilities, right? That's the thing that kind of gets people confused.
Yeah, I think that's the main part, where your opponent has a card in play that it doesn't stop you from playing a card, but it stops that card from doing anything, which is not normally how cards work. For example, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, right? The old 2/1 first strike that makes non-creature spells cost 1 more. That card stops you from making illegal plays. If you only have 1 mana, you can't play a 1 mana spell because she taxes you. But these planeswalkers don't do that. And to give you an example, I cast Honor of the God Pharaoh, the 2 and a red, discard a card, draw 2 cards card. And then it resolved, and then I got a 1/1, and that's all that happened. My opponent had a Narset in play, which says I cannot draw more than 1 card per turn.
Oh man, yeah, and there's a lot of that stuff going on too with like Kasmina, for example, protecting your creatures and all that kind of stuff. And when it comes down to it, I feel like this is one of the formats that games played online are going to play out significantly differently on average than they do in real life, just because both players are going to forget a bunch of stuff. And online, people keep trying things and going, you can tell they're pausing, and it's like, what's going on? The program's bugged, that kind of thing. But it's like,
you have Tamiyo and your opponent casts Toll the Invasion to make you discard a card, and then nothing happens because Tamiyo stops that. You have, the Wanderer out, and your opponent goes Jai's Greeting, kill your creature, and your opponent, just doesn't bin their creature, and you're like, what the hell? Oh, wait, they have the Wanderer out. And this happens over and over again because there's so many planeswalkers that suppress abilities. They have these passives that stop abilities or effects. And it is really complicated. It's also just naturally hard to decide when to attack a planeswalker versus to attack the opponent, right?
Right.
And how much to attack with. There's a lot of on-the-board tricks that I think we're long past the point where people have stopped using, or the designers have stopped making cards that do on the board tricks. Like all the planeswalkers are some kind of on the board trick, right? You're like, all right, I'll play this and gain 4 life. It's like, no, I have a Tibalt in play,
right?
And it's even more complicated because a lot of these planeswalkers, once you've used them twice, kind of sit and play, don't do anything. So your opponent kind of just mentally checks them or passes over them, and it's just like, well, yeah, this isn't relevant. This doesn't do anything. But then all of a sudden later it'll be like, no, actually.
Yeah, it really does. So the question then becomes, if this is a much more complicated set, is it fine to have one like this every once in a while? Is this damaging? I mean, there seemed to be messaging from Wizards that they didn't want sets like this anymore, but maybe it's fine to put one out.
I think that you really have to watch out. You can't do this every set. And I think there are some costs. I think that this is probably, if you really, really want to do the whole Planeswalker, Avengers Endgame, conclusion of the story arc, then I think that's fine, but you just have to ration that. I would not expect the next set or the next set after that even to be nearly as complicated, unless they have a whole new philosophy, which is possible, of course.
I mean, to me, the thing that stands out is they could have put this many planeswalkers in, because a traditional planeswalker, you do the thing and then the thing's over. Right? It doesn't stick around on the battlefield in this kind of invisible way. It's like, you make a creature, you draw a card, you kill a thing, whatever. These ones with this, design element of having all static abilities is really what, throws that complexity level up. I saw an interesting conversation online where people were saying, imagine if this was your first limited set.
Right. And for a certain amount of people, it is going to be.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, all right, I play this. And they're like, okay, that does nothing because of this card I haven't played.
Right. And it's like, oh, all right.
And there is a big difference between finding out your card doesn't work after you've already cast it versus being told, hey, you can't target my hexproof creature with your removal spell, and you just have to back up. And you feel, you're going to feel a little embarrassed, but you don't lose your removal spell. This is even worse because it's like, oh yeah, that resolves.
Yeah. That happens. Yeah. Put that in your graveyard. Thank you. My turn. Anyway, so that's something to keep our eye on as well. Though I will say that, this does have the potential to benefit high-level players, right? People that listen to the show. And I don't know. It just seems like if you're tracking all those things better than your opponent, you might be able to get a small edge. It's not really
it is less of an effect than the effect Rares have on the format, but it definitely does reward you for having practiced the format a lot and being good at catching this kind of stuff.
So we'll keep an eye on that. Last question before we get to the cards. Speed of the format. So, the theory here is with the planeswalkers running around that if you just ran the raw math numbers on number of damage output for all the games ever, that there would be less damage going to players than normal because some percentage of that damage is going to go to planeswalkers. That should have the effect of slowing the format down at least somewhat. Has that been your Has that been your experience so far? Is it a slower format?
Yes and no. Like, yes, the format is slow and the games don't end super quickly. And you can put 6 drop cards that want you to be at 20 life in your deck and have a reasonable expectation that they're good. Mm-hmm. But it is important to get on the board quickly. Imagine your opponent's on the play and has a 3-mana planeswalker on the play. If you don't have a 2-drop, they're just getting both activations out of this. They're getting to minus their Narset twice, and you can't do anything about it. So it does matter that you're able to affect the board and do so relatively quickly, but you also don't need to, worry about your opponents curving out and beating you down all that often. It does happen. You play against red, white, and they just play Dork into Trusted Pegasus. You're on a lot of a clock.
Yeah. And by the way, that is something that I've been trying to figure out for the show's purposes, the best way to express this, because we need a shortcut like the speed of the format. But the truth of the matter is, and I've mentioned this before, is that there's no such thing as the speed of the format, right? Like, you could tell me that, oh, this is a really slow format, but if I go like mountain into, plains or whatever, and I have an aggressive start, are you going to tell me this is a slow format then? Like, I'm beating you down. We have had formats that are really specifically designed to be slow, like Rise of the Eldrazi and M14, where it was really not possible to draft a fast deck. It just wasn't, the pieces just weren't there. But almost all formats have fast decks and slow decks. And sure, if I told you that most of the decks were slower rather than faster, I might feel comfortable saying it was a slow format, but it's not actually descriptive of how it plays out. It depends on what deck you have and what deck your opponent has, and then I can tell you if it's fast or slow. The real determining factor is sort of what's the bottom line. If I build my deck, do I need to consider that you might show up with a fast deck? Like, is that a realistic outcome that I can not ignore?
Mostly no. Like, right. The tools are there to build a fast deck. Again, red-white can be fast. Black-red can sometimes be fast. Like, you can get pressured quickly, but you generally will not be facing super fast decks.
Yeah. The green-red deck has some nice curves, too, with Raging Crunch. And why don't we start there, by the way?
The Crunch.
Yeah, Raging Crunch. Raging Crunch is a performer. We like the card in the set review, and it's been really good. I mean, it's overstatted, and the drawback isn't as bad as it looks. So, you look at these type of cards, and you think, oh, I can't even block, and you can. And,
there was
usually you can attack.
An unnamed professional player attacked into BK's Raging Crunch and promptly been there too.
Oh no! Hopefully in playtesting.
Oh no! This was the Pro Tour.
No, no, oh no!
But I mean, that's the sort of thing that can happen, even if you're someone who beat me for a mock slot at years past. So.
Oh wow! All right. Yeah, so Raging Crunch has been quite good, and
it also synergizes nicely with the 4 Power Matter stuff, which there's some good rewards. Obviously, the Crunch Wrangler is the classic combo, but there's still other cards that care about it, like Bolt Bend or whatever it's called, the redirect card. Yeah. So you do care, Kiora, for example.
Yeah, for sure. Ajani's Pridemate. I've noticed that it's underperforming a little bit, like based on your deck at the MC, the other player who drafted at the MC, and then I had it in one of my decks. Maybe it's just my expectations are a little high for it, but is that card fine or?
It's fine, but yes, I would not draft the deck around it. That has not been very good. Like, it's the sort of thing I would include it if you needed a 2-drop and had some life gain cards or some proliferate cards. But for the most part, I don't think you want to include it.
Yeah. And I've been down on it a little too. So maybe not quite there's been formats where I would take that card very, very highly. We just have to mention this. We've mentioned it before, but the gods, the God Eternals, they are dumb. I mean, they're like really, really annoying levels of dumb and limited. I mean, I think that they're one of the best examples in a long time of the argument that pops up from time to time that maybe there should be cards that, like, it's asking a lot to put everything in one booster pack that needs to satisfy the needs of commander players, of limited players, of standard players, of modern players, right? It's like really kind of pushing the boundaries where, like you mentioned, when somebody plays Oketra, you're just like, I'm kind of done. And I was chatting with Woody, and he was like, he's taken I think a rather absurd policy of just instantly conceding if Oketra goes on the stack for his opponent. He's just like, I'm done. I'm not playing it. Which obviously
his opponent's at 1. Woody has 10 creatures in play.
Yeah, he's like,
the rules are the rules.
The rules are rules. Next game, And I mean, I understand. Like, look, I would not throw away, even if my equity isn't super high to beat Oketra, I would still just take it. But Woody is representative of a lot of people of their feelings, right? Which is like, this is just not fun to play against.
There's doesn't care about your feelings.
She really doesn't. And she shows that to you every time she hits the battlefield. But, you know, this format, as from a limited perspective, just would be better if the God Eternals weren't in it or just were tweaked a little bit, right? Like the fact that when they get exiled, they can come back.
I think
might be relevant for Constructed, but not for us. Like they should just be gone.
I've ranted about this before, but I think the whole doesn't actually get exiled exile clause is just ridiculous. I think from a gameplay perspective, it would be really nice if Wanderer's Strike and Ob Nixilis' Cruelty could answer them or Prison Realm.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, absolutely nothing. I also think that from like a game design perspective, making it so the exile zone isn't actually the exile zone, it just, I don't know. It doesn't really make that much sense to me. Like, what are you trying to say here?
Right. So, and I mean, I get it because, you know, I could easily see a scenario where that clause did not exist. Yeah. And then they play tested some stuff for Constructed and decided, well, we don't want it to be like the Scarab God or whatever, but we want these to be able to come back in kind of a less strong way. And so they're like, we'll tack this on there. And then, you know, generally speaking, I feel like R&D kind of gives a pass to mythic rares when it comes to limited. Like, I don't think that they really consider upper power ceiling on them because they just don't pop up often enough in their mind. But now we're talking about a cycle here, right? So now there's 5 of those and they actually do come up fairly often. So I don't know. It's interesting to me. I don't think that these will ruin the format, but they have the biggest chance of doing so. That cycle of mythics that we mentioned, the finales in these one. And they are dumb. I mean, they are really brutal to play against. Next card, Rising Populace seemed to be performing fairly well, maybe a little better. Card's okay, right? I mean, getting a counter on it, you know, through normal game actions. This is the 2 and white 2/2 that gets a +1 counter when one of your creatures or planeswalkers die. And the planeswalker part's pretty relevant too. Mm-hmm, exactly. So, you know, so that's a card I just wanted to mention. This one's sweet. I have not been able to do this, but the Wanderer plus Command the Dreadhorde. Oh, yeah. This is apparently just the Mondo combo because the static ability on Wanderer says prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to you. And Command the Dreadhorde, actually, you know, they've made that change for black cards. They used to have you lose life, but many of them actually do damage to you now. So Command the Dreadhorde is the rare that says choose any number of target creature and or planeswalker cards in graveyards. Command the Dreadhorde deals damage to you equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards, put them onto the battlefield. It means you can just get everything.
Yep.
That is sweet.
Apparently that card was templated a little differently initially, and you could get back the Wanderer and it would stop the damage. So they switched the order of the effects so that because that was just too dumb.
Wait, what do you mean?
The Dreadhorde was like put everything into play.
The Wanderer was in the graveyard already?
Yes. Put everything in your graveyard into play, or for all graveyards into play, then deal damage, and you'd get back the Wanderer and just take no damage.
I see. That is really funny. Okay. Anyway, that's a sweet combo that I super want to pull off now. Erratic Visionary has felt a little too slow to me. This is the 1 and a blue 1/3, and you can pay 1 and a blue and tap it to loot, which is an effect that I thought, you know, this looks fine, right? Like looting's very powerful, certainly worth the mana investment. But every time my opponents played it, they've almost never had a chance to actually activate it. And I felt similarly on my side. Does that reflect for you? Like, have you had success with it?
I think the card's fine. You do want a 2-drop to protect your planeswalkers, and every now and then, if you only need to get like 1 or 2 loots out of it to feel like you did an okay thing. Mm-hmm. I think the Visionary is fine. I don't mind playing the first one. I tend not to play multiples.
Okay, yeah, having 2 of them down. So basically, I should adjust my expectations to I might loot 1 or 2 times late in the game, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. Boy, these proliferate cards that don't cost mana need some
Evolution Sage and Flux Channeler are both just obscene.
Yes, they're so disgusting, and to a lesser extent, the Grateful Apparition falls under this category. It's just its condition is harder to meet because it actually hits something. But boy, Flux Channeler and Evolution Sage have been gross. Like
we had Evolution
really
Sage
nasty
as the best uncommon that wasn't Kaya.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I have done completely stupid stuff. It feels broken's a little strong, but it feels super, super strong.
It's just Tireless Tracker.
Well, it's not quite that, is it? I mean, there's some situations where it's better.
Yeah.
I mean, it just does more on board. It is really not Tireless Tracker at all.
No, I agree. Tireless Tracker is a good comparison.
It's not the comp for it, but it is insane. So make sure you give those cards a chance. And what they do, specifically what Evolution Sage does, is really make sure you map out your turn. Because I have already had it where I'm like, oh, if I just did this in reverse order, we've got an extra counter on something. Like, make sure that, and I should actually expand that out, not just the turn that you're doing these things, but when you cast the things. Because the really powerful stuff, right, is when you can set up like 2 things that can benefit, and then you can play it and a land in the same turn. Because, boy, that's powerful already. And then you're really threatening the next turn to kind of go off. So
yeah, it's not hard to do that either.
No, it's really not. So, yeah.
And that's part of the reason that cards like Pollen Bright Druid are just a lot better than they might look.
Yeah, they kickstart you. Also, of note, kill them. Kill them. Evolution Sage and Flux Channeler must die. Do
that's
not
part of the
let
reason
them
that these cards are good, too, is even if they're not great in your deck, if you play a Flux Channeler on turn 3 or 4, your opponent's definitely going to kill it.
Yeah, definitely.
If they can.
I mean, that lightning rod effect. And if they don't, well, they should have. Kasmina's Transmutation. This card has not been good for me at all. I thought it would be better. This is the 1 in a blue that turns the creature into a 1/1 frog or whatever with no abilities.
No, I think this card's not very good.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't have super high hopes for it, but, you know, I did think, well, I'll run one of these in my blue decks, and now I'm like looking not to. I just keep finding myself in situations where the creatures that I need to deal with just have +1/+1 counters on it, and the transmutation is just not doing what I need it to do.
Yep, I agree. I give it a pretty low grade in my written set review, and I think it has lived up to that, or down to that.
Down to that as it is. Stealth Mission. To kill a planeswalker, that's the blue 2 in a blue that puts 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature and makes it unblockable. This has been a nice middle ground for me on destroy target planeswalker, but also leave me with some value, right? Because I keep thinking about these transactions that we need to make about they play a planeswalker, get value, and then we use a card to kill it, and how I'm not super stoked on that. This is similar to that, except for that you get to keep the +1/+1 counters on your creature. So at least you get that rather than just using a spell that straight up just kills the planeswalker. This one, of course, does carry some risk with it because you do need a creature, and that creature does need to be able to get through. But it has been happening for me, at least, where I've played this like one of these card and been able to get through pretty consistently.
Yeah.
Gideon Blackblade, as many of you pointed out, cannot target itself. Thank you for that. Honestly, I'm like a little surprised that was the only card that we misread during the rare review because we were both so tired.
Oh yeah, we were burning the candle at both ends.
Indeed. Thanks everybody for pointing that out. You'd have to target something else. Dreadhorde Invasion. So this is one that you kind of talked me up on, but you know what? I don't know. I don't know if it's actually been quite as good as advertised. This is the 1 in a black that lets you amass 1 and lose a life at the beginning of your upkeep, and then if you attack with a zombie token when it's 6. Are you still as high on it as you were then?
Yeah, I'm pretty high on it. Like, I think it is better than the commons and uncommons.
Okay.
But I don't think it's as good as the best cards, no.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I like, this is all anecdotal, of course, but I just keep beating it. Yeah. Like, they played on turn 2, and I think, well, this is going to be an uphill. Like when they do that with Bitter Blossom, you're dead.
Are you just trying to say that you're really good or whatever?
No, I'm not. Come on. But it's just they never, ever get to turn the thing sideways at full value, I don't know. Tithe Bearer Giant is love. Tithe Bearer Giant is life.
Yeah, this card is good. Yes,
I love it. It just does everything I want. It stops the ground attack. Gets me that card. I wish I gained life. One of the cards that's been particularly scary at common is Spellgorger Weird.
You got to go infinite with it.
Infinite? How do I do that?
In your blue-black deck, you cast Aid the Fallen, getting back Spellgorger Weird in a Planeswalker. Then you play Spellgorger Weird in your Planeswalker, and then you use up the Planeswalker. Then you sack Spellgorger to get back Aid the Fallen. And then you get back Spellgorger Weird in Planeswalker.
Okay. Wait, but I can't just... this is a little slow, right?
Oh, wait. Are you talking about the red weird or the blue weird?
I'm talking about the red one.
Oh, no. I was talking about the blue one. You go infinite with the blue weird and Aid the Fallen.
Okay. But I mean, how much mana does that take?
Oh, a lot.
It was like infinite, kind of. No, I was talking about the red one, the tuna red 2/2. Yeah.
In our limited meeting, Sam Black actually said he thought Spellgorger Weird was better than Jaya's Greeting as the best red common.
Okay. I mean, that's kind of bold, I would say. I think your first Jaya's Greeting is probably better on average, but
I do too. Look, but Spellgorger Weird is just a beater. If you play this on 3 and then you just go
scary
contingency plan at some point, the draw card proliferate, it's a 4/4.
Yeah. And that's for, very low downside. And, there's a certain feeling you get when your opponent plays a spell, right? And sometimes you're like, I don't care about that. And sometimes you're like, I really care about that. And Spellgorger Weird on 3, I'm like, gulp. And this is specifically out of the blue-red deck. But still, it is really powerful. And it gets out of range out of a lot of the removal very quickly. And, instant speed stuff triggers it as well. This is the 2/2 that gets +1/+1 counter and you cast a non-creature spell. So, I like that one a lot. Definitely have a lot of respect for it when it hits the battlefield. We mentioned this before, but people attack flyers into turret ogre a lot.
Yeah,
so
that does happen.
Turns out red doesn't get that normally. I played against and with Awakening of V2 Ghazi a few times. This is the
3 green instant. Make one of your lands into a 0/0 creature and put 9 +1/+1 counters on it against haste.
Yeah, and it's still a land. So interestingly, I was playing blue and my opponent played this and I thought, no problem. I've got Totally Lost. I've got Callous Dismissal. And I'm like, neither of those work on it at all. So I ended up losing to it because it was just massive. It also, of course, dodges basically all of the damage-based removal, even the -X removal. It is just sort of a bear to deal with. Yet some of the cards also, can actually kill it, like Wanderer's Strike or something like that, in which case, fine. But I've been impressed by the card. Like it's always hard for us to evaluate big, right? Just like, oh, what's special about this card? Well, it's huge. This one has instant speed. It changes the game. You can block with it. So I like it. And also, like I said, it's a little more resilient than I thought, because I thought, well, if it gets bounced, that's like really annoying. Like you're down a land drop, you lose the 5 mana, all that stuff. But that's actually really hard to do. I received a really brutal welcome to the format by my opponent. Thanks a lot, opponent, who played New Horizons and then Kiora.
Yeah, start untapping their lands.
Yeah, and I thought that's fine, that's cute, whatever. It taps for 2 mana, and then they untap it and taps for 2 more. So that's like pretty powerful, right? Just to be able to make a bunch of mana. But then they cast both the red and white finale against me for full value that game. And I have an additional note for you, Luis. If you cast the white finale where X is 10 or more, then you get 10 4/4 flying vigilance angels in addition to the 10 2/2 vigilance soldiers. And they all trigger Kiora, the stupid angels. So my opponent drew 10 cards while putting whatever it is, 60 power or whatever on the battle. I'm like, is this real? So yes, I wish I would have killed Kiora. It's also necessary.
You do need the
exactly.
You do need the 10 cards and all the angels.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Exactly. Like, is this honestly necessary at this point, opponent, from Kiora Behemoth Beckoner? The interesting part, though, is that it is not optional. So I don't know if my opponent knew it was coming. They did actually have enough cards to not deck themselves.
That would be a really funny way to get decked.
I would have loved it. Yeah. A few more cards here. Snare Spinner's been a really good blocker for these ramp decks too. Mm-hmm. Another card that, again, you got to respect it. It's one of those ones that makes you go, oh crap, is Angrath, Captain of Chaos. This card in the aggressive decks, which is kind of where you and I had it pegged as being great, has been really strong. It's 2 and then 2 Rakdos Hybrid for 5 loyalty. Creatures you control have menace is one of the better static abilities on all of the planeswalkers at Uncommon. And then -2 to amass 2 either gets you a 2/2 or gets your amass token you already had bigger, in which case these two have, that sort of haste ability that we talk about. And it's a real beating. If they even just have like a 2/2 army token and they go Angrath minus it, it's like, crap, that thing's a 4/4 with menace plus any other creatures they have menace. And it's actually really tough because Angrath says, look, I'm going to attack with all my creatures. You can attack me back. Fine. Do it. No problem. But then you just lose on the crackback a lot of times. So he really puts you in a tough spot. I've been impressed by it, by Angrath.
Angrath's just a fantastic card. It also is really good at killing opposing planeswalkers, thanks to Menace.
Yes, totally. So I really like that card a lot. And then the last one was Ashiok in the control decks. Certainly does serve a role. Ashiok milling you for a whole bunch can absolutely be a win condition. But outside of that, you really don't want to see Ashiok, in your deck because like just a blue or a black deck, I have been really unimpressed just like with random milling. Like you really do need to have like
what happens is a lot of games go to decking even without Ashiok.
Yeah,
there's
that
just these
true.
haymakers back and forth, and you don't want your opponent to your opponent eventually runs out of cards. Ashiok just accelerates it by quite a bit.
Maybe that's why the gods are here, right? Like they're like, these decks keep going the distance. They're going to mulligans, going to mill everybody out. We'll just end the game much quicker. So,
yeah. The other thing is that Ashiok, if it sometimes can, let's say you play Ashiok, tick Ashiok down. They hit Ashiok but don't kill Ashiok. Next turn you Ashiok again and Ashiok's dead, right? You milled 8. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's enough that you now have decking inevitability and you can just play the game with that in mind.
Right.
You don't need to race them to 0 exactly.
Right. And that happened actually on camera a few times, although it happened to be with Jace, but similar idea where it was a few mid-game Jace activations but then Jace died and the game just continued on for a long time, but that set that player up long enough to win the game through decking. So, yeah. Okay, that's going to do it. Do you have anything else you want to throw in there, Luis, before we take off?
I don't think so. I think that does a pretty good job. I wish I had a better overall strategy than open your rear, take your rear, don't move off your rear. But honestly, I think that is a good place to be. I mean, That is a good place to be strategically. That's what you're supposed to do to win in this particular format.
Right. So that's the thing that we're going to pay the most attention to for sure is if that actually holds up, because there are still going to be decks, hopefully, that could overcome that. If not, then this format gets to be a little silly. That's going to do it for this week. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We do appreciate you taking the time to visit Luis and I every week, and we enjoy our time with you as well. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find us everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. I want to thank our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Make sure you sell them your cards back, plus 30% trade-in bonus if you want to sell them back to CFB directly, and you can find that on the sell page there on Channel Fireball, or you can just get cash. Those cards you have sitting around, you can turn those into War of the Spark booster boxes. I swear they go up more than you think, and you want to do it in a timely fashion though, because once they rotate out, if they're not playable in Modern or something further, they tend to drop off in value, so you want to stay up on top of it. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
So some listeners might remember that I actually had the opportunity to serve on the jury of a trial a couple weeks ago.
Oh, you haven't got to tell them. I forgot. Yeah.
And I couldn't say anything until it was concluded, which it has now. And so I wanted to tell, and once it's concluded, they impressed upon us that you are able to tell anyone you want, anything you want, because you were there. And that once the proceedings are done, then there's no risks there. So I wanted to go through that. It was a bit of a doozy. I'd never done this before.
I never have either, by the way. So I really enjoyed
it was a pretty
from your perspective.
Pretty interesting experience. So I showed up on Monday, kind of expecting, most of the time with jury duty, you show up, they don't end up calling you, you go home, you've done your civic duty. Mm-hmm. I got called to the first case, and I was in the jury box. There's 13 folks in the jury box, and then like 12 folks sitting on chairs in front of it, and then another like 50 people or something in the gallery. Mm-hmm. And they go through a lot of preliminary stuff, like weeding people out, like someone had dialysis, so they just couldn't serve on a jury. Someone had a business trip the next day, so they couldn't go, and the judge, some of the excuses were flimsier, and they got questioned, and the judge sometimes said, like, nah, that's not a good enough excuse or whatever. Mm-hmm. But we eventually got to 13 people, and I was among those 13 people. We then found out that we were going to be in a criminal trial, and it was going to last the rest of the week. So we proceeded to, they let us go to lunch. They came back, and then we just kicked things off. We started going from there, and the prosecution, started to present their case. The defendant.
So you got to sit in on a real criminal trial here. That's cool.
100% real criminal trial. Yes, the charges against the defendant, who was there, were aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon, aggravated robbery, attempted assault with a deadly weapon, and menacing.
So this sounds pretty serious.
Yes, it was. And I didn't really know exactly what those things all meant anyway, at least not legally. I can guess what they mean. But So the first thing the prosecution does is they both prosecution and defense do their opening statement, right? And they like kind of give you here's our theory of the crime, and they don't have to back any of this up with evidence because they're going to prove that in the trial, or at least try to. And basically what the prosecution said was the defendant, who was, again, sitting in the courtroom there, was in a Burger King, asked to use the bathroom, was told no. This is a Burger King in one of the seedier areas of town, which is why they have a lock on the bathroom. Not all businesses have that. Was told no, he could not use the bathroom. As he was walking back to his seat, a man in line kind of chuckled at the situation, and the defendant started a fight with that guy and attempted to stab him with a knife, which he had in his hand.
Burger King?
Yes. And then
you try to stab a human being?
Yes, over what the prosecution said was basically nothing, but so then the fight happened. No one got hurt in the fight, which is amazing. And then the defendant went outside, stole a car from a woman and her friend who were about to leave outside, and then rammed a police car to get away, and drove away and was then arrested later. So That's their theory of the case. This guy starts a fight with a knife, then ends up stealing a car, carjacking. This is the aggravated robbery, ramming a police car and driving away.
Okay.
The defense's theory was the other guy started the fight, and apparently one of the rules in one of the laws in Colorado is if you feel like you are being threatened, you're allowed to defend yourself, even if the person threatening you hasn't actually taken physical action against you. So, for example, Marshall, imagine that you took the last coffee, and I said, "I'm going to kill you. You took my last coffee," or yeah. I was threatening you.
You might have said that to me before in the past,
right? You could, under the law, clock me, right? Just sucker punch me because I said I was going to kill you, and you were afraid for your life. You thought that I was a threat. And so that the defense's theory was that the guy in line started this fight, and then that the defendant didn't carjack those women. He borrowed the car from them because he knew one of them. They didn't really explain the ramming the police car very, very much. But the thing that really surprised me the most about this whole process was I thought it would be pretty boring, and that the shows you watch about like courtroom processes, like, Law and Order, any movie or any novel, like a John Grisham novel you read, would be overly dramatized. Well, they are, but they also aren't. There were definitely a lot of moments that were pretty dramatic. And I don't know if that's because those fictional accounts do a good job of recreating that drama, or that courtrooms are more dramatic now because people think that's the way courtrooms are supposed to be.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I also think it's because, this actually does matter, right? Like a civil case matters, but like we're talking about for this guy, whether he's going to go to jail for some number of years. Like that's going to impact his life a lot.
Yeah. It's taking away his liberty. This is a big deal for sure.
Right. And we were supposed to find him, if we wanted to find him guilty, it had to be beyond a reasonable doubt. They really impressed that upon us, where it's not like, yeah, I was gone for 10 minutes. And when I came back, Marshall was gone and my coffee was gone. I think he stole my coffee. That would be enough for me to accuse you. But,
to threaten my life.
Exactly. But in a court of law, that wouldn't be enough because you could just say like, look, I left and then the coffee was there by itself and someone else took it. And I think it would not meet the standard of reasonable doubt. Right. So they go through, and here's the part that like, it was kind of astounding is when they have witnesses on the stand, they go through exhaustively. Like they had the police officer who showed up, right? They're like, what's your name? What's your rank? How long have you been a Denver police officer? What do you do on a normal day of police work? How are you trained? And I'm just like, wow, they are really going to the mattresses here. Just like, yes, I believe this guy's a police officer. Like,
just to demonstrate to you, the jury, that this guy's a legitimate police officer. Wow.
And so so they showed up, and first they spent a lot of time establishing that where the location was. They had like a Google map of like this Burger King next to these other restaurants, and then like a couple different angles, so everyone knew exactly where they were talking about. It's like, yeah, okay, I think we all agree this is where we are. So then, this police officer shows up, and he's got body cam footage because his body cam was working, and they talked about the body cam and when they were issued to the department and all this other stuff, and how they worked. And so then they go, and he shows up. He gets out of his car, and his car's blocking the defendant's car in because the women flagged him down and said, "Hey, that guy just stole our car." And he orders the guy out of the car at gunpoint many times, like 15 times. And here's the part where I felt like I liked the seeing that this police officer chose not to just light up the car full of bullets, where we have had, unfortunately, many examples where for even less than that, a police officer will shoot someone. But this police officer decided, like, this guy wasn't running anyone over. He just had stolen a car, and he decided not to fire on him as a result. So you see in the body cam, the guy's car rams the police officer's car out of the way because it was blocking him in, and then drives away. So then they talk about, like, they bring the guy who did all the security cameras for inside the Burger King, and they establish, like, you set these up. What expertise do you have in order to set up these cameras? Like, how do these work and all this? And then the guy from outside. And here's the thing. There was just video footage of everything. There was video cameras from outside the complex of the defendant, who's very distinctive. I'll get back to that. Walking into the whole complex, walking and eventually walking to the Burger King. There's then cameras from inside the Burger King where there's no sound, and that's critical for the defense's case. Where you see the guy kind of walk up, to try to use the bathroom, walk back to his seat. The other guy looks over. He looks back at the other guy. He like does the like, yeah, what's up? Like throw your arms back kind of thing. And then walks over to the guy in line with a knife in hand. And then starts to stab the guy, or try to stab the guy. He never connected. And the fight scene, as it were, I mean, not even scene, because this is like two human beings. This actually happened. Was really funny, but only funny because no one actually got hurt. Like, actually nobody got hurt. But these two guys were chasing each other around the Burger King. The one guy's trying to stab the other guy. They're throwing chairs at each other. At one point, one guy throws the yellow wet floor sign at the other guy. And like,
oh my God.
And it's just his clown shoes. And then eventually the defendant leaves. So they're like, and it's like, you can just see it all on camera. And then they have like a witness of a guy and his girlfriend who were there buying like a soda, who were, in front of the guy in line. And then they're like, yeah, that the defendant, was crazy. He came over and he threatened the other guy and he started stabbing him. And so we got out of there because we don't want to get stabbed by that guy. Like, that was their eyewitness testimony. And then they have like, they have testimony of the guy who got attacked, who was quite a character himself, comes in like an orange suit with an orange tie and an orange hat. And like, just like, he was just like, I didn't know the guy. And then there's like both people are like yelling racial expletives at each other. And like,
what the hell?
And it was just the whole thing was just like, first of all, it was so clearly over nothing. Neither of these guys knew each other. Like, and the guy said the only reason he chuckled was he has been homeless and was homeless at the time. And he understands how ridiculous it is when you're told you can't use the bathroom. So,
okay. So he wasn't even laughing at the guy, like,
no, that's what he said. But of course, the other guy interpreted it as such.
Right.
Then they bring up like, this guy's past, and he has had some legal trouble too. And at one point, like, he starts like yelling at the defense lawyer who's trying to like grill him or whatever. And like, they then call like the women whose car got stolen. And this woman's like, yeah, me and my friend just did a double shift as waitresses at this Mexican restaurant. We were going to drive home. And then this guy comes up and steals the car from me by threatening me with this knife. And then you see on camera the guy like getting in there so that she can't close the door. And both women leaving and then flagging down the police officer. And the defense's theory was she lent him the car.
Oh my God.
That they were friends, ridiculous. And she lent him the car. And both her and her friend were like, I don't know this guy. Her friend's like, never seen this guy before in my life. This is not my friend's friend. And then it's like, they also, can you imagine, like, you just spent 8 hours doing hard work and you're about to leave and give your friend a ride home, and one of your friends comes over to you and says, hey, can I borrow your car for an hour?
Right.
And you're like, yeah, sure. I'll just sit here at the shopping center.
Right. And talk to this police officer. Yeah, come on.
And so then eventually the defendant goes on the stand and it's ridiculous. And at one point, because again, the defendant looked pretty distinctive. He was pretty short and pretty big. But the prosecution waited till midway through the trial before having one of the detectives read off the suspect, like, stats sheet or whatever. And this guy was 4'10", 270, which is just like a really distinctive combination of numbers. Less than 5 feet tall and really big
Right.
I mean, I guess to give you a little bit of a frame of reference, especially for listeners who, maybe don't use those measurements. Imagine someone 2 feet shorter than Marshall who weighs 50 pounds more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what it is, right? Like,
yeah.
So this guy, you could definitely tell who he was on the cameras. And at no point did the defense even ever argue this wasn't him on camera.
Yeah. It sounds like they took a shot, but none of this stuff sounds even remotely reasonable.
Yeah. So, they go through this. It just takes so long because they're like, here's how we picked him out of the lineup. Here's how we run our lineups. Here, let's call in the detective who ran the lineup. They were just trying to nail this guy. Like, every single thing was just like their T's were crossed, their I's were dotted. And, they had a DNA expert to because he left some gum in the car, and they explained how DNA works. And at one point they're asking the defendant, okay, so you borrowed the car from your friend, is what you say. What did you do after? He's like, oh, well, I just parked the car by the side of the road and I threw the keys on the ground. And they're like, okay, so how are you going to return this to your friend? He's like, well, I guess I didn't try very hard to do that. It's like, okay. Yeah. Oh, and apparently the knife he had was a letter opener that he just likes holding. And in the videos, it was just like a knife with like a 3-inch long blade or something like that. And they're like, well, was the letter opener sharp? He's like, yeah, I guess so. He's like, could you cut someone with it? He's like, yeah, you could probably do that. So you walked over with a knife. Objection, letter opener. Sorry, you walked over with a letter opener in your hand and got in an argument with this guy. What did you think he was going to think?
Right. And then you tried to stab him with the letter opener repeatedly in the Burger King.
And he's like, well, he was going to attack me.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God.
Unfortunately, for me, the trial ended on a somewhat sour note as I got randomed out. One of the 13 people is an alternate, which means the alternate is supposed to observe everything and then doesn't get to deliberate unless one of the jurors gets sick or have an accident or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And that's literally one out of all of them.
One out of 13, yeah. So at the end of the trial, I got sent home. I was not involved in deliberations.
Oh man, you were steaming too.
I was pretty mad because it's just like, look, if I'm literally going to spend 5 days on this, which I did. Yeah. I want to actually have the payoff of getting to talk about it because you're not supposed to talk about it during the trial because you're not supposed to talk about it until you have all the info.
So you had to sit there and watch all of it, not discuss it with any of the people. And then the moment before you were finally going to get a chance to actually do something, they were like, nah, just wait. I was
thanked for my service. Also, being a juror is pretty lucrative. They give you $50 a day for each day past the third. So I got a
How much was parking?
Well, see, here's the thing. As a member of the juror, I got a discount on parking. I didn't get free parking. I got a discount on parking.
Sounds like Naya agrees with the parking
that's kind of how I felt. But anyway, end of the day, this guy was guilty and, I imagine 5 seconds. Like, this is the most ridiculous contrived story I've ever heard. And being on a jury trial, especially for a criminal trial, is very interesting. I would recommend doing so if you have the opportunity. You don't have a lot of control over it, but I feel good about doing it, even if the ending was not quite as exciting as I had hoped.